some fan art photos I had made so that I would have something on screen. I think it's nice, fan art. Hi Nate, hi Breezy, hi fellas, hi Diva, hi Nisana. Let me turn down the background noise a little bit. Today, I wanted to get back into ASMR, because I've always really liked ASMR, as you might know. You might know a little bit about that. But anyway, I found my fairy tale book. It's my childhood one, not the new one. The new one, I really like how the new one looks, but to be honest, the stories it's full of are kind of difficult. God. Anyway, hi. Is it better if I, whisper? Or is it better if I just talk? I don't really know. Sorry. Also, another thing I can adjust. This makes it eliminates a lot of background noise, but it makes everything quieter. And you can't hear the noise as well. Anyway. I'm going to just pick a random story to start reading. Gonna get right into it. The one I want to read now is called The Laidly Worm. In Bamborough Castle there once lived a king who had 2 children, a son named Chilled Wine, and a daughter who was called May Margaret. Their mother, a fair woman, was dead, and the king mourned her long and faithfully. But after his son Chilled Wine went to seek his fortune, the king, hunting in the forest, came across a lady of such great beauty that he fell in love with her at once and determined to marry her. Now, Princess May Margaret was not overpleased to think that her mother's place should be taken by a strange woman, nor was she pleased to think that she would have to give up keeping house for her father the king, for she had always taken pride in her work. But she said nothing, though she stood long on the castle walls, looking out across the sea, wishing for her dear brother's return. For, see, they had mothered each other. I found a tide. Still no news came of Chilled Wine. So on the day when the old king was to bring the new queen home, May Margaret counted over the keys of the castle chambers, knotted them on a string, and after casting them over her left shoulder for luck, more for her father's sake than for the new queen's regard, she stood at the castle gate ready to hand over the keys to her stepmother. Now, as the bridal procession approached with all the lords of the North Country and some of the Scots lords in attendance, she looked so fair and sweet that the lords whispered to each other in awe of her beauty, and when, after saying in a voice like a mavis, "Oh, welcome, welcome, father, unto your halls and towers, and welcome to my stepmother, for all that's here is yours," She turned upon the step and tripped into the yard. The Scots Lord said aloud, "Forsooth, May Margaret's grace surpasses all that we have met. She has so fair a face." Now the new queen's overheard this, and she stamped her foot, and her face flushed with anger as she turned her about and called, "You might have accepted me, but I will bring May Margaret to a Laidly Worm's degree. I'll bring her as low as a Laidly Worm that warps about a stone, and not till the child of wine come back will the witching be undone." Well, hearing this, May Margaret laughed, not knowing that her new stepmother, for all her beauty, was a witch, and the laugh the wicked woman made the wicked woman still more angry. So that same night she left her royal bed, and returning to the lonely cave where she had ever done her magic, she cast Princess May Margaret under a spell with charms 3 times 3 and passes 9 times 9. This was her spell: "I weird ye to a Laidly Worm, and such shall ye ever be, until Childwine the king's dear son comes home across the sea. Until the world comes to an end, unspelled you'll never be, unless Childwine of his own free will, Saul gives you kisses 3. So it came to pass that Princess May Margaret went to her bed a beauteous maiden, full of grace, and rose next to morning a Laidly Worm. For when her tirewoman came to dress her, they found her coiled up in her bed an awesome dragon, which uncoiled itself and came towards them. And when they ran away terrified, the Laidly Worm crawled and crept and crept and crawled down to the sea, till it reached the rock of the Spindle Stone, which is called the Hough. And there it curled itself round the stone and lay basking in the sun. Then for 7 miles east and 7 miles west and 7 miles north and south, the whole countryside knew the hunger of the Laidly Worm of Spindlestone Hough, for it drove the awesome beast to leave its resting place at night and devour everything it came across. At last, a wise warlock told the people that if they wished to be quit of these horrors, they must take every drop of milk of 7 white milk kine every morn and every eve to the trough of a stone at the foot of the Hough, for the Laidly Worm to drink. And this they did, and after that the Laidly Worm troubled the countryside no longer, but lay warped about the Hough, looking out at the sea with its terrible snout in the air. But the word of its doings had gone east and had gone west, and had even gone over the sea and come to Childwine, and the news of it angered him, for he thought perchance it had something to do with his beloved sister May Margaret's disappearance. So he called his men-at-arms together and said, "We must sail to Bamborough and laid by Spindlestone, so as to quell and kill this Laidly Worm." Then they built a ship without delay, laying the keel with wood from the rowan tree. And they made masts of rowan wood also, and oars likewise, and so furnished set forth. Now the wicked queen knew by her arts they were coming, so she sent out her imps to still the wind, so that the fluttering sails of silk hung idle on the masts. But Childwine was not to be bested, so he called out the oarsmen. Thus it came to pass that one morn the wicked queen, looking from the keep, saw the gallant ship in Bamborough Bay, and she sent out all her witch wives and her impets to raise a storm and sink the ship. But they came back unable to hurt it, for, see you, it was built of rowan wood, over which witches have no power. Then, as a last device, the witch queen laid spells upon the Laidly Worm, saying, "Oh, Laidly Worm, go make their topmast heel. Go, worm the sand and creep beneath the keel." Now the Laidly Worm had no choice but to obey, so the worm leapt up, the worm leapt down, and played it around each plank. And aye the ship came close to shore, she heeled as if she sank. 3 times 3 did Childwine attempt to land, and 3 times 3 the Laidly Worm kept the good ship from the shore. At last the Childwine gave the word to put the ship about, and the Witch Queen, who was watching from the keep, thought he had given up, but he was not to be bested, for he had only rounded the next point to the Budley Sands. And there, jumping into the shoal water, he got safely to land, and drawing his sword of proof, rushed up to fight the awesome worm. But as he raised his sword to strike, he heard a voice, soft as the western wind. "Oh, quit thy sword, unbend thy bow, and give me kisses 3. For though I seem a laidly worm, no harm I'll do to thee." And the voice seemed to him like the voice of his dear sister May Margaret, so he stayed his hand. Then once again the laidly worm said, "Oh, quit thy sword, unbend thy bow, my laidly form forget. Forgive the wrong and kiss me thrice, for love of May Margaret." Then Child Wind, remembering how he had loved his sister, put his arms round the laidly worm and kissed it once, and he kissed the loathly thing twice, and he kissed it yet a third time as he stood with the wet sand at his feet. Then, with a hiss and a roar, the laidly worm sank to the sand, and in his arms was May Margaret. He wrapped her in his mantle, for she trembled as in the cold sea air, and carried her to Bamborough Castle, where the wicked queen, knowing her hour had come, stood, all deserted by her imps and witch wives, on the stairs, twisting her hands. Then Child Wind looked at her, cried, "Woe, woe to thee, thou wicked witch, and ill fate shall thine be. The doom thou dread on May Margaret, the same doom shalt thou dree. Henceforth thou'lt be a laidly toad, that in the clay doth wend, and unspelt thou wilt never be, till this world has an end." Bleh. Tongue twisters. And as he spoke, the wicked queen began to shrivel, and she shriveled and shriveled to a horrid wrinkled toad that hopped down to the castle steps and disappeared in a crevice. But to this day, a loathsome toad is sometimes seen haunting Bamborough Keep, and that laidly toad is the wicked Witch Queen. But Child Wind and Princess May Margaret loved each other as much as ever, and lived happily ever after. The end. I think that one is pretty nice. That one is, I think it was interesting. The next one I have interest in. My story, was it worm or worm for the record? It was spelt worm, but it describes her as a dragon, so I assume it was spelt with an O. But since it described her as a dragon, I would figure it's the Y worm. The next story I want to read. It's a very generic story, so it's not very special, but it has an extended bit that I always liked as a kid, that other people might not have heard, so I want to read it. It's The 3 Little Pigs. It sounds, you probably think you're familiar, but it's got a nice extended bit. Regardless, once upon a time, there was an old sow who had 3 little pigs, and as she had not enough for them to eat, she said they had better go out into the world and seek their fortunes. Now, the eldest pig went first, and as he trotted along the road, he met a man carrying a bundle of straw. So he said very politely, "If you please, sir, could you give me that straw to build me a house?" And the man, seeing what good manners the little pig had, gave him the straw, and the little pig set to work and built a beautiful house with it. Now, when it was finished, a wolf happened to pass that way, and when he saw the house, he smelt the pig inside. He knocked at the door and said, little pig, let me in, let me in." But the little pig saw the wolf's big paws through the keyhole, so he answered back, "No, no, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." Then the wolf showed his teeth and said, "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." So he huffed and he puffed and he blew the house in. Then he ate up little Piggy and went on his way. Now, the next Piggy, when he started, met a man carrying a bundle of furs, and being very polite, he said to him, "If you please, sir, could you give me that furs to build me a house?" And the man, seeing what good manners the little pig had, gave him the furs, and the little pig set to work and built himself a beautiful house. Now it so happened that when the house was finished, the wolf paused that way, and he saw the house, and he smelt the pig inside. So he knocked at the door and said, little pig, let me in, let me in." But the little pig peeped through the keyhole and saw the wolf's great ears, so he answered back, "No, no, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." Then the wolf showed his teeth and said, "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in." So he huffed and he puffed and he blew his house in. Then he ate up little Piggy and went on his way. Now, the third little Piggy, when he started, met a man carrying a load of bricks, and, being very polite, he said, "If you please, sir, could you give me those bricks to build me a house?" And the man, seeing that he had been well brought up, gave him the bricks, and the little pig set to work and built himself a beautiful house. That was gross. I meant to mute, it didn't work. Okay, I'm pretending that didn't happen. I didn't know that first. Anyway, and once again it happened that when it was finished, the wolf chanced to come that way, and when he saw that house, he smelled the pig inside. So he knocked at the door and said, little pig, let me in, let me in." But the little pig peeped through the keyhole and saw the wolf's great eyes, so he answered, "No, no, no, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," says the wolf, showing his teeth. Well, he huffed and he puffed. He puffed and he huffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, but he could not blow the house down. At last he was so out of breath that he couldn't huff and he couldn't puff anymore, so he thought a bit. Then he said, "Little pig, I know where there is ever such a nice field of turnips." "Do you?" says little Piggy, "and where may that be?" "I'll show you," says the wolf, "if you will be ready at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. I will call round for you, and we can go together to Farmer Smith's field and get turnips for dinner." "Thank you kindly," says the little Piggy. "I will be ready at 6 o'clock sharp." But you see, the little pig was not one to be taken in with chaff. So he got up at 5, trotted off to Farmer Smith's field, rooted up the turnips, and was home eating them for breakfast when the wolf clattered at the door and cried, little pig, aren't you ready?" "Ready?" says the little piggy. "Why, what a sluggard you are! I've been to the field and come back again, and I'm having a nice pot full of turnips for breakfast." Then the wolf grew red with rage, but he was determined to eat the little piggy. So he said, as if he didn't care, "I'm glad you like them, but I know of something better than turnips." "Indeed," says little piggy, "and what may that be?" "A nice apple tree down in Murray Gardens with the juiciest, sweetest apples on it. So if you will be ready at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, I will come round for you and we can get the apples together." "Thank you kindly," says little piggy. "I will be sure and be ready at 5 o'clock sharp." Now, the next morning he bustled up ever so early, and it wasn't 4 o'clock when he started to get the apples. But you see, the wolf had been taken in once and wasn't going to be taken in again, so he also started at 4 o'clock, and we saw the little pig had just got his basket half full of apples when he saw the wolf coming down the road, licking his lips. "Hello," says the wolf, "here already? You are an early bird. Are the apples nice?" Very nice, says little Piggy. I'll throw you down one to try. And he threw it so far away that when the wolf had gone to pick it up, the little pig was able to jump down with his basket and run home. Well, the wolf was very angry, but he went down the next day to the little piggy's house and called through the door, as mild as milk. Little pig, you are so clever, I should like to give you a fairing. So if you are to come with me to the fair this afternoon, you shall have one. Thank you kindly, says little piggy. What time shall we start? At 3 o'clock sharp, says the wolf, so be sure to be ready. I'll be ready before 3, sniggered the little piggy. And he was. He started early in the morning and went to the fair. He rode in a swing and enjoyed himself ever so much, and bought himself a butter churn as a fairing, and trotted away towards home long before 3 o'clock. But just as he got back to the top of the hill, what should he see but the wolf coming up it, all panting and red with rage. Well, there was no place to hide in but the butter churn, so he crept into it, and was just pulling down the cover when the train started to roll down the hill. Bumpity, bumpity, bump. Of course, Piggy inside began to squeal, and when the wolf heard the noise and saw the butter churn rolling down on top of him, he was so frightened that he turned tail and ran away. But he was still determined to get the little pig for his dinner, so he went next day to his house and told the little pig how sorry he was to not be able to keep his promise of going to the fair, all because of a dreadful, awful, terrible thing that rushed at him, making a fearsome noise. Dear me, says the little piggy, that must have been me. I hid inside the butter churn when I saw you coming, and it started to roll. I'm sorry I frightened you, but this was too much. The wolf danced about with rage and swore he would come down the chimney and eat up the little pig for his supper. But while he was climbing up to the roof, the little pig made up a blazing fire and put on a big pot full of water to boil. Then, just as the wolf was coming down the chimney, the little pig off with the lid, and plump! In fell the wolf into the scalding water. So the little piggy put on the cover again, boiled the wolf up, and ate him for supper. The end. Hi, Dancing and Hiringa. I think that one's a fun one, to be honest. I like the extended ending. Super Pig. Do you think you would eat the wolf? I wonder. Who goes to the fair at 3 in the morning? I don't know, maybe it's old time. Maybe time worked differently in Germany back then. Anyway, the next story I want to read is Dick Whittington and his cat. More than 500 years ago, there was a little boy named Dick Whittington, and this is true. His father and mother died when he was too young to work, and so poor little Dick was very badly off. He was quite glad to get the parings of the potatoes to eat, and a dry crust of bread now and then, and more than that he did not often get, for the village where he lived was a very poor one, and the neighbors were not able to spare him very much. Now, the country folk in those days thought that the people of London were all fine ladies and gentlemen, and that they were singing and dancing all the day long, and so rich that even the streets, they said, were paved with gold. Dick used to sit by and listen while all these strange tales of the wealth of London were told, and it made him long to go and live there and have plenty to eat and fine clothes to wear, instead of the rags and hard fare that fell to his lot in the country. So one day, when a great wagon with 8 horses stopped in on its way through the village, Dick made friends with the wagoner and begged him to be taken with him to London. The man felt sorry for poor little Dick when he heard that he had no father or mother to take care of him, and saw how ragged and how badly in need of help he was. So he agreed to take him, and off they set. How far it was and how many days they took over the journey I do not know, but in due time Dick found himself in the wonderful city which he had heard so much of and pictured to himself so grandly. But oh, how disappointed he was when he got there! How dirty it was, and the people, how unlike the gay company with music and singing that he had dreamt of. He wandered up and down the streets, one after the other, until he was tired out, but not one did he find that was paved with gold. Dirt and plenty that he could see, but none of the gold that he thought to have put in his pockets as fast as he chose to pick it up. Little Dick ran about till he was tired, and it was growing dark, and at last he sat himself down in a corner and fell asleep. When morning came, he was very cold and hungry, and though he had asked everyone he met to help him, only one or two gave him a halfpenny to buy some bread. For 2 or 3 days he lived in the streets in this way, only just able to keep himself alive, when he managed to get some work to do in a hayfield, and that kept him for a short time longer, till the haymaking was over. After this he was as badly off as ever, and did not know where to turn. One day in his wanderings he lay down to rest in the doorway of the house of a rich marine, whose name was Fitzwarren. But here he was soon seen by the cookmaid, who was an unkind, bad-tempered woman, and she cried out to him to be off. Lazy rogue, she called him, and she said she'd precious quick throw some dirty dishwater over him, boiling hot, if he didn't go. However, just then Mr. Fitzwarren himself came to dinner, and when he saw what was happening, he asked Dick why he was lying there. "You're old enough to be at work, my boy," he said. "I'm afraid you have a mind to be lazy." "Indeed, sir," said Dick to him, "indeed that it is not so." And he told him how hard he tried to get work to do, and how ill he was for want of food. Dick, poor fellow, was now so weak that though he tried to stand, he had to lie down again, for it was more than 3 days since he had had anything to eat at all. The kind merchant gave orders for him to be taken into the house and gave him a good dinner, and then he said that he was to be kept, to do whatever work he could to help the cook. And now Dick would have been happy enough in this good family if it had not been for the ill-natured cook, who did her best to make life a burden to him. Night and morning she was forever scolding him. Nothing he did was good enough. It was look sharp here and hurry up there, and there was no pleasing her. And many's the beating he had from the broomstick or ladle, or whatever else she had in her hand. At last it came to the ears of Miss Alice, Mr. Fitzwarren's daughter, how badly the cook was treating poor Dick, and she told the cook that she would quickly lose her place if she didn't treat him more kindly, for Dick had become quite a favorite with the family. After that, the cook's behavior was a little better, but Dick still had another hardship that he bore with difficulty, for he slept in a garret where there were many holes in the walls and the floor, that every night as he lay in bed the room was overrun with rats and mice, and sometimes he could hardly sleep a wink. One day, when he earned a penny for cleaning a gentleman's shoes, he met a little girl with a cat in her arms, and asked whether or not she would sell it to him. Yes, she would, she said, though the cat was such a good mouser that she was sorry to part with her. This just suited Dick, who kept the cat up in his garret, feeding her scraps of his own dinner that he saved for every day. In a little while he had no more bother with the rats and mice. Puss soon saw to that, and he slept sound every night. Soon after this, Mr. Fitzwarren had a ship ready to sail, and as it was his custom that all his servants should be given a chance of good fortune as well as himself, he called them all into the counting-house and asked them what they would send out. They all had something that they were willing to venture, except poor Dick, who had neither money nor goods, and so could send nothing. For this reason he did not come into the room with the rest, but Miss Alice guessed what was the matter and ordered him to be called in. She then said, "I will lay down some money for him out of my own purse, But her father told her that that would not do, for it must be something of his own. When Dick heard this, he said, "I have nothing whatever but a cat, which I bought for a penny some time ago. Go, my boy, fetch your cat then, and let her go." Dick went upstairs and fetched poor Puss, but there were tears in his eyes when he gave her to the captain. "For," he said, "I shall now be kept awake all night by the rats and mice." All the company laughed at Dick's odd venture, and Miss Alice, who felt sorry about him, gave him some money to buy another cat. Now this and other marks of kindness shown him by Miss Alice made the ill-tempered cook jealous of poor Dick, and she began to use him more cruelly than ever, and was always making game of him for sending his cat to the sea. "What do you think your cat will sell for?" she'd ask. "As much money as would buy a stick to beat you with?" At last poor Dick could not bear this usage any longer, and he thought he would run away. So he made a bundle of his things, he hadn't many, and started very early in the morning on All Hallows Day, the 1st of November. He walked as far as Holloway, and there he sat down to rest on a stone, which this day, they say, is called Whittington's Stone, and began to wonder to himself which road he should take. While he was thinking what he should do with the bells of the Bow Church in Cheapside began to chime, and as they rang, he fancied that they were singing over and over again, "Turn again, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London." "Lord Mayor of London," said he to himself. "Why, to be sure, wouldn't I put up with almost anything now to be Lord Mayor of London, and ride in a fine coach when I grow up to be a man? Well, I'll go back and think nothing of the cuffing and scolding of the cross old cook if I am to be Lord Mayor of London at last." So back he went, and he was lucky enough to get into the house and set about his work before the cook came down. But now you must hear what befell Mrs. Puss all this while. The ship Unicorn that she was on was a long time at sea, and that cat made herself useful as she would among the unwelcome rats that lived on board too. At last the ship put into harbor on the coast of Barbary, where the only people are the Moors. They had never seen before a ship from England, and flocked in numbers to see the sailors, whose different color and foreign dress were a great wonder to them. They were soon eager to buy the goods with which the ship was laden, and patterns were sent ashore for the king to see. He was so much pleased with them that he sent for the captain to come to the palace, and honored him with an invitation to dinner. But no sooner were they seated, as is the custom there, on the fine rugs and carpets that covered the floor, than great numbers of rats and mice came scampering in, swarming all over the dishes, and helping themselves from all the good things there were to eat. The captain was amazed and wondered whether they didn't find such a pest most unpleasant. "Oh yes," said they, "it was so, and the king wouldn't give half his treasure to be freed of them. For they not only spoil his dinner, but they even attack him in his bed at night, so that a watch has to be kept while he's sleeping for fear of them." The captain was overjoyed. He thought at once of a poor Dick Whittington of his cat, and said he had a creature on board ship that would soon do for all these vermin if she were there. Of course, when the king heard this, he was eager to possess this wonderful animal. "Bring it to me at once," he said, "for the vermin are dreadful, and if only it will do what you say, I will load your ship with gold and jewels in exchange for it." The captain, who knew his business, took care not to underrate the value of Dick's cat. He told his majesty how inconvenient it would be to part with her, as when she was gone the rats might destroy the goods in the ship. However, to oblige the king, he would fetch her. "Oh, make haste, do," cried the queen. "I too am impatient to see this dear creature." Off with the captain while another dinner was ready. He took Puss under his arm and got back to the mice once again. When Puss saw them, she didn't wait to be told, but jumped out of the captain's arm, and in no time almost all the rats and mice were dead at her feet, while the rest of them had scuttled off to their holes in fright. The king was delighted to get rid of so easily of such an intolerable plague, and the queen desired that an animal who had done them such a service might be brought to her. Upon which the captain called out, "Puss, puss, puss," and she came running to him. Then he presented her to the queen, who was rather afraid at first to touch a creature who had made such a havoc with her claws. However, when the captain called her "Pussy, Pussy," and began to stroke her, the queen also ventured to touch her and cried, "Pussy, Putty, Putty," in imitation of the captain, for she hadn't learned to speak English. He then put her on the queen's lap, where she purred and played with her majesty's hand and was soon asleep. The king, having seen what Mrs. Puss could do, and learning that her kittens would soon stock the whole country and keep it free from rats, after bargaining with the captain for the ship's whole cargo, then gave him 10 times as much for the cat as all the rest amounted to. The captain then said farewell to the court of Barbary, and after a fair voyage reached London again with his precious load of gold and jewels safe and sound. One morning early, Mr. Fitzwarren had just come to his counting house and settled him at the desk to count the cash, when there came a knock at the door. "Who's there?" said he. "A friend," replied the voice. "I come with good news of your ship, the Unicorn." The merchant in haste opened the door, and who were there but the ship's captain and the mate, bearing a chest with jewels and a bill of lading. When he had looked this over, he lifted his eyes and thanked heaven for sending him such a prosperous voyage. The honest captain next told him about the cat, and showed him the rich present the king had sent for poor Dick. Rejoicing on behalf of Dick as much as he had done over to his good fortune, he called out to his servants to come and bring up Dick. "Go fetch him, and we'll tell him of his fame. Pray call him Mr. Whittington by name." The servants, some of them, hesitated at this, and said so great of a treasure was too much for a lad like Dick. But Mr. Fitzwarren now showed himself the good man that he was, and refused to deprive him of the value of a single penny. "God forbid," he cried. "It's all his own, and he shall have it, to a farthing." He then sent for Dick, who at the moment was scouring pots for the cook and was black with dirt. He tried to excuse himself from coming into the room in such a plight, but the merchant made him come, and had a chair set for him. And he then began to think that they must be making a game of him. So he begged them not to play tricks on a poor simple boy, but to let him downstairs again, back to work in the scullery. "Indeed, Mr. Whittington," said the merchant, "we are all quite in earnest of you, and I have most heartily rejoiced at the news that these gentlemen have brought. For the captain has sold your cat to the King of Barbary, and brings you in return for her more riches than I possess in the whole world, and may you long enjoy them." Mr. Fitzwarren then told the men to open the great treasure they had brought with them, saying, "There is nothing more for Mr. Whittington to do but to put it in some place of safety." Poor Dick hardly knew how to behave himself for joy. He begged his master to take part of it, he pleased, since he owed it all to his kindness. "No, no," answered Mr. Fitzwarren. "This all belongs to you, and I have no doubt that you shall use it well." Dick next begged his mistress, and then Miss Alice, to accept a part of his good fortune, but they would not, and at the same time told him what great joy they felt at his great success. But he was far too kind-hearted to keep it all to himself, so he made a present to the captain, the mate, and the rest of Mr. Fitzwarren's servants, and even to his old enemy, the cross cook. After this, Mr. Fitzwarren advised himself to send for a tailor and get himself dressed like a gentleman, and told him he was welcome to live in his house till he could provide with a better. When Mr. Whittington's face was washed, his hair curled, and he was dressed in a smart suit of clothes, he was just as handsome and fine a young man as any who visited at Mr. Fitzwarren's. And so thought Miss Fair Alice Fitzwarren, who had once been so kind to him and looked upon him with pity, and now she felt he was quite fit to be her sweetheart, and none the less, no doubt, because Mr. Whittington was always thinking what he could do to please her, and making her the prettiest presents that could be. Mr. Fitzwarren soon saw the way which the wind blew, and ere long proposed to join them in marriage, and to this they both readily agreed. A day for the wedding was soon fixed, and as they were attended to the church by the Lord Mayor, the court of aldermen, the sheriffs, and a great number of the richest merchants in London, whom they afterwards treated with a magnificent feast, history tells us that Mr. Whittington and his lady left in great splendor, and were very happy. They had several children. He was sheriff and thrice Lord Mayor of London, and received the humour of knighthood from Henry V. Henry V? Pretty bad Henry to get it from, honestly. After the king's conquest of France, Sir Richard Whittington entertained him and the king at dinner at the mansion house in such sumptuous a manner that the king said, never had prince such a subject, to which Sir Richard replied, never had subject such a prince. I'll be honest, I'm getting a little too jazzy myself. We can consider this a warm-up, because it's been a while since I've done an ASMR stream, and I think at the same time this wasn't very good ASMR. Anyway, I got a little too loud. I'm drowsy, and so I think I'm gonna go to bed myself. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye, Dance Again. Bye-bye, Solace. Bye-bye, Nisima. Bye-bye, Teja. Bye-bye, Yared. Bye-bye, Neat. Bye-bye, Yared. Did I already say Yared? Bye-bye, Mambo. Bye-bye, Breezy. Wait. Whoop. Whoop. Thank you, Anonymous. Wait. It's not... I'll do a cleaning stream. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Bye, Zeta Perfecta. Thank you, Anonymous Gifter. Background for stream. I wanted something because I'm not going to be tracking a model. I thought it might be nice to put on the screen. Anyway, bye-bye, Valentine. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.